This program on treating opioid addiction in Northwest Ohio is brought to you by the Eugenio Madero Family Medical Education Fund at Harvard Medical School.
Approximately 14 Ohioans on average die every day because of opioid overdosing. It's become a tremendous problem and affects many people here in the Northwest Ohio area. Recently, there was some work done to help attack that kind of thing. Northwest Community College, in conjunction with community hospitals of Williams County, put together a number of initiatives that they presented to groups here at Northwest State Community College. And with me is Dr. Michael Thompson, who is the president of Northwest Community College. And how did you decide to put all of this together and involve all these community members?
So really appreciate the question. So it started with an anonymous donor who is now not so anonymous because he is enjoying this tremendously. The Rossini International Corporation gave money to a place where he was educated, Harvard Medical. He was been at the Harvard Business School. And so he gave money to the group and said, we'd really like to make an impact in Northwest Ohio. Why? Because Rossini has a plant in Montpelier. And that led to a discussion from Harvard Medical School, who in this area has done really good community outreach. The answer, community hospitals, and particularly Bryan Community Hospital doing an outreach on breast cancer earlier this year. And so they got a phone call and they picked up the phone and said, well, who's the best place where we can host something? And Northwest State Community College came up. So that led to at least the formation of the triad that got us here today.
I find it interesting because I thought immediately of your medical training that you give here at Northwest State Community College, and I was thinking, wow, it must have grown out of that. And then I see Rossini involved, who is a manufacturer here in Northwest Ohio, Montpelier, with plants up in Michigan and Texas. So they're obviously concerned about what's going on. So it's really almost driven by a business program that's interested in seeing people better helped.
So what you're hinting at, which really we're seeing is the substance use disorders and opioid use disorders cut across races, classes, ages, and geography. They're not sparing anyone. And so here's a manufacturing company that understands care of their team is extremely important, helping their team members get through this. So yeah, it would normally maybe emanate out of a medical field, but it's really everyone's problem. So I'm not surprised it came out of a manufacturer, which is one of the core industries of this area.
What do you hope comes out of this then?
So we talked a long time that it was easy to put an event together that people would feel good or people would be touched. And we wanted to take the extra step. And the extra step is, what can we do to make a difference here in Northwest Ohio? So ultimately, all the work of the first two with the kind of the heart and the head, the community town forum, we've already captured good ideas from the sessions, and they'll be in there. We have state legislatures in there. We have Recovery Ohio in there. We're going to talk through and literally vote on what are the 2 or 3 best things we can lean in Northwest Ohio that'll make a difference, and then we'll hand those to the very teams and agencies that see that every day. So that what we're looking to get out of it is incorporating best practice for rural areas that will make a difference here in Northwest Ohio.
And you're bringing stakeholders all together so that hopefully they'll make those connections beyond what already is being done and improve the work that's done towards this.
There are resources and teams already doing this work, and a lot of it is great work. It's not that there's something lacking, there's something the next step, and the next step is kind of coordination across things, communication across things. So when we think about it, medical record systems that can talk to each other, primary care physician being able to understand what specialists are doing and then getting that back and forth. The program we saw with the movie on Friday night, having a home-based kind of holistic care, because often treating the one thing, there's co-diseases of anxiety and depression that get attached to it. So at the end of the day, we're hoping to bring awareness across the groups that connecting them together makes a real difference in the outcomes. That's the evidence-based practice we're seeing. It makes a real difference in outcomes.
Well, Harvard Medical School is in part of this program and really developed the program that we're seeing here. And what we've seen the night before, last night, we saw a movie called The Providers, which actually was on PBS on Independent Lens, showing an area in New Mexico where they have a high use of opiates and have caused a lot of overdoses there, and how they addressed that. And it's much a story like Northwest Ohio. They're a much more rural area, but they have providers, medical providers there who have to deal with this all the time. So they were showing some of how they have responded to that, and that's one part of this. Harvard Medical School has developed this kind of a program. Today, they're doing a program for the doctors and the various medical professionals, and then later this afternoon, a session with community people who are a part of this, maybe to bring stakeholders all together. Kathy Finn is with me from Harvard Medical School, and we so appreciate having you here. I think it's wonderful that you have a program like this. You developed this a while ago.
Yeah, so this started, we began thinking about this when we received a wonderful donation from Eugenio Madero. He initiated the Eugenio Madero Family Medical Education Fund at Harvard University, the medical school in particular. And what his intention was to create a program for people in this area of the country specifically. He is the president of Versini, and they have a plant here in Montpelier, Ohio. And so he said, I want to do something about the opioid crisis. What do you think? So I put this program together with the help of all my colleagues at the Office for External Education at Harvard Medical School. And what we do there is we have continuing medical education programs for people here and actually across the world. So we thought, we'd like to create a program that would be for not just medical doctors, but allied health people, people who, work with people who are dealing with substance use disorder every day. So this program is for nurses, for social workers, other allied health professionals, and for doctors. We talk in the program about a 360 care approach to working with patients, and so that's why we have all medical providers that were in the audience today.
Probably the number one question, a lot of people that ask me, and I'm not a part of the medical community, but people want to know, why are opiates so addictive, and why are people turning to them so much more?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. It started many years ago. I think that people talk, and I am not an MD, I'm a social worker by training, but people talk a lot about it's a disease of despair, and there's a lot of factors. It's cultural, it's, people are in different types of pain, physical pain, but also psychological pain. There was a time when doctors were prescribing too many of these pills, but it's a multifaceted story, and it's happened over more than a decade. A complicated story, but certain parts of the country have fewer economic opportunities. There's more stress, there's more other health conditions, so it's one of those things that is the perfect storm, if you will, of things that happened in our culture and medicine and economically, and so that's what a lot of people talk about. It's not just one story.
Yeah, I hear about programs to work with physicians to not prescribe opiates as much, or to give short-term prescriptions when someone has a physical ailment or something. But it's got to be a lot more complicated.
It is, and we talked about this today. It's not just this sort of blanket approach. I mean, there are guidelines that we need to follow, or doctors need to follow, and it's really assessing the person in front of you and what's their story. One of the reasons we decided to show a documentary last evening was to have providers who are in a rural healthcare setting, but also to focus on the story element of people's stories and really getting their history. And it's not you don't prescribe opioids at all. They're an appropriate medication where appropriate.
One of the things that we heard last night was that shaming doesn't work.
No. No. And one of our presenters here talked about the toxic nature of shame, and how it increases your likelihood to use more. It increases your likelihood to not take care of yourself. When you feel bad about yourself, you're exiled from the group. You feel less than and not part of a group, and so it doesn't help at all. Makes it worse.
So what do you do after these 2 days are over?
I think it's about what comes out of the town forum. I think we're going to listen to what people thought of the CE education and give you some feedback on what they thought. I think it's really now like what does this community do? And so what have you learned? What can you take from this? And I think it'll carry on through the town forum. What are our action steps? I think that's what it's going to be. That's the last step today.
Do you provide training to other people on opioid addiction?
We do. We have a free course actually through the medical school, and we can provide that link that we may be able to show here. It is a free 24-hour course for medical professionals to get a waiver training to prescribe medications for opioid use disorder. So it was sponsored by NIDA, so the government sponsored this program, and it is free of charge. I'm happy to provide that information.
Wonderful.
I would like to also say there is a course that the medical school has developed with Harvard X called the Opioid Crisis in America, and that is for the general public. It's 7 hours of narrative-based training with patients in recovery, with doctors. Some of the doctors here were actually part of that course, and it is I'm a bit biased, but it is a wonderful course that the public has really engaged in. There's been 25,000 people registered for this course. Again, absolutely free. So that is Opioid X, the Opioid Crisis in America. I can also provide the link for that.
Chad Tinkle is with me, the interim CEO at Community Hospitals and Wellness Centers. And Chad, I can understand why community hospitals and wellness centers would want to be a part of a symposium like this with Northwest State Community College. That makes a lot of sense to me. What about community hospitals and wellness centers? How do you respond to all of this?
Yeah, so there's a few things that came up today that we are already addressing a little bit. So the first presenter, Zev, talked about mindful-based stress reduction. That's a program that we offer to the community on an ongoing basis for about the last 7 years. And so that is trying to mentally, as you talked about today, being more aware of your body and what's going on around you. Another presenter today talked about the pain management side of it. We've offered a pain management clinic in the community since about 2010, so that we are also trying to help from that standpoint. We also had it in the women's health issues, and we have started an OB/GYN clinic with two outstanding doctors, Dr. Bazzi and Dr. Hasune, who are also trying to help females in all aspects of their pregnancy.
What do you think community hospitals and wellness centers would like to see happen as a result of all this?
Continued discussions on how we can address and educate the community. We have community members that come in looking for pain relief through the emergency room, education there, and the most appropriate way to go about seeking out relief for that pain. It's not necessarily an emergency room visit. It's more of a physician and developing a relationship with that primary care physician and then getting appropriate care from that. So education and communication.
Our program will continue right after this.
This program on treating opioid addiction in Northwest Ohio is brought to you by the Eugenio Madero Family Medical Education Fund at Harvard Medical School.
One of the benefits of this program of getting people together is getting the stakeholders to look at different ways that they're serving people with opioid addictions and working with other people and seeing how they might work together on some of this and be more effective. Alan Rudder is with me from Shalom Counseling. And Alan, what do you find that's effective in your counseling with people with opioid addictions?
Well, I think, Bill, that it's everyone has some different things that are going to work for them, and I think finding out what is unique to that individual person. I think we can come in with our kind of cookie cutter approaches that we think work, but until you come face to face with that individual and understand their history and their own story and perspective, it's hard to know exactly what's going to work for them. I think the other thing about that is that real change and transformation that we're looking for takes place within the heart and mind of the individual. And so for them to be able to find a treatment provider that is safe and that they can develop rapport with, that is there kind of what we refer to as a non-judgmental zone, where they can really dig down, dive deep into their own life and history and some of the things that have brought them to these addictive behaviors, some of the causes. Until we're able to get to that depth in that person's life, I think it's hard to just import treatment modalities outside. But when they are open, then that clinician is able to really bring to them some amazing tools to help them understand, how to step outside of that. So I think that's one of the things that we find essential in our treatment to them.
You're on a panel discussion today of different stakeholders. What message are you bringing to the group today?
Yeah, the first thing is understanding what is the impact of the opioid and this drug crisis to our communities. And the thing I think that is really helpful for us to understand about that is that we used to have an image of what a heroin addict was. Someone out of the 60s and the hippie movement, or this kind of sexual revolution culture that starts with heroin injections, and they're in these urban settings, and they're maybe the folks that are crashed out in the alleys or alongside a dumpster. But what we have come to terms with is this is right here in our homes. This is in our neighborhoods. And people's point of entry into this addiction is not just initially through a needle, but as we know from a lot of stuff that's in the press is that 80% of heroin addicts today and opioid dependent people have started with prescription meds. And so their entry point is through family, friends, and their own prescription meds.
What can family members do for someone in their own family who is addicted?
That's a really good question, Bill, and I think that's another one of these things in terms of just understanding how they can assist in treatment. One is be educated. And this forum here today is a great opportunity for that educational process. Again, we've had these images of what an addict is. It's also striking to me to just know that addicts, when they move from use to addiction, they begin these patterns of lying, cheating, stealing, betraying, victimizing. Family members know that firsthand because they've been, they've had stuff stolen. They have so many lies and betrayals and stuff there. And I think reach out. And when you see some of these early signs of this kind of behavior, major shifts in behavior is probably, but not always, an indication that a person is into some trouble. Reach out, ask those questions, talk about it ahead of time, and don't avoid it. Avoidance is not a gift, It's so important to engage in the conversation, reach out, don't go at it alone, and just know that these small things that we may want to ignore, they're really the big things that we need to address early on.
Where do the people who have the addictions and where do the families find support to make sure that they can maybe get through this?
Right. Well, one thing is we know that if they're not asking questions and if they're not reaching out to some of these treatment providers, and in our community, we have a resource guide that we pass out to a lot of people. And so I think all of these treatment providers, if you contact mental health providers, hospitals, law enforcement, the courts, adult probation department, they're going to tell you where some of those places are and who's there. Find people who've gone through it, trusted friends. Again, if we're going to just isolate ourselves, think that we can handle this, keep it in our house, it's not a good approach. And so reaching out to these other people, and they'll plug you into these places and who's there. I think that's so critical. And at the early onset of it, or this suspicious behavior, is when we need to really respond, not when the wheels have fallen off. So I think that's critical to understand in the process.
Common Pleas Court Judge Jeff Robinson is with me today to talk about, let's talk about the judicial system, the component there, and some incentives that you're doing with the drug court in Fulton County.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I'm very proud of this program. I found out I was going to be elected the Common Pleas Judge almost a year before I started, due to the primary process in a presidential election year.
Well, that's nice.
No, it was. It gave me an opportunity to get prepared.
Tell me the basics of what a drug court is.
Well, drug court is, in our drug court, you have to have a felony conviction.
Okay.
It's not a treatment in lieu of conviction. This is you will be convicted of a felony offense. There are certain offenses which would exclude you. Sexual offenses, felonious assault, some of the more serious things. But most of the crimes that we see are obviously the possession cases, and then a lot of burglaries, breaking and entering, credit card fraud, petty theft, stealing televisions from Walmart, that kind of thing, that are driven by the need to have money to buy the drugs.
Yeah.
So, those are the type of offenders we see. Our program consists of a core group of people that work for me, and then a number of treatment providers, people from the Department of Jobs and Family Services, the Sheriff's Department. Actually, the Sheriff is a part of the treatment team if he likes to show up, our county prosecutor, both of whom I might add had given their blessing to this program and have continued to be very supportive. But what happens is that a person will make an application. That doesn't mean they're going to get in. We have an assessment conducted to determine their suitability for the program. Because the fact that we have it doesn't mean that people are going to react properly. And we don't want people in who just simply don't want to go to prison.
Sure.
We want people who have had enough and are serious about trying to become drug-free.
In the presentation we saw last night and what I've heard, there's a real stigma attached to all this too.
I think being an addict carries with it a whole bundle of problems. But I think that people who are in recovery, when the public realizes they're in recovery, there's a lot of, well, good luck, if I can help, let me know. We've had a lot of help from the community, from businesses and area businesses, community leaders asking us if they can do something. We've had employers overlook felonies that have, for people on our drug court to give them jobs. We have one young lady who's a manager at a local food chain, and she got the job initially with the felony and with the opiate addiction, and she's still in treatment. And they made her a manager because she's so good. So we think we're making some progress. I guess that's the bottom line.
How long is someone in the drug court?
But it's an individualized program, and it sort of depends. We had one young lady who came and sat there and her first meeting and said, "Oh, I'm so excited to be here," and da-da-da-da. And she went over to drop. They have to drop urine to be tested. And she had what I call the Wizinator 5000 on, which is a fake urine thing. So that's tampering with evidence. That's an F3. So now she's got an F3. She's out of drug court. And I happened to be over there the day she pled guilty. Our probation department's in another building, and I saw her in the holding cell. And I told my drug court coordinator, said, "Go talk to her and tell her if she does what she's supposed to do while she's in prison, I'll bring her back and I'll put her in a program." She did. I gave her a judicial release. She came back in the program, and it took her a year and 2 months. Typically, it's about 2 years. It's about 2 years.
What happens after someone leaves the program?
Well, hopefully,
Hopefully you don't see him again?
Hopefully I don't see him again. Hopefully they stay sober.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to have a 100% success rate in that. But you know, the experience of going through this, the 4 people who have been through come back. They come back and they'll sit through a session with us. And they do meetings. And they have counseling. And we try to teach them how to understand those triggers that cause them to use, and to recognize those things, and to recognize, I need to call someone, I need to have help, those are the things we're doing, and to be honest about what they're doing, and to avoid the people that got them there. We try to teach them how they can live their life sober, and not just sober from not using, but sober mentally, so that they understand they're always going to have this issue, but how to avoid it. So hopefully we've given them the tools that they need to move on and be successful. At least that's the goal.
That's a great message, and it's a hopeful message, which I like too.
Well, yeah, you know, I like to think it's most felons don't give me hugs, but the people in my drug court, that's part of what we do. You know, telling them that they're human beings. My favorite thing is I put this program together because the people that are in this program are entitled to a life. They are entitled to a life. They've made some terrible decisions, but that doesn't mean their life is ended. It doesn't mean their life is over. It doesn't mean that they have to have all this guilt that's associated with that decision making for the rest of their life. They're entitled to a life. They're entitled to be happy. And if you can get them into that thought process, I think it makes a lot of difference. And you know, I've been told, you know, for the judge to come down from the bench when I don't have a robe on when I'm doing drug court, and I get done, and I'll see someone who I think is struggling, and I'll hug them, and I'll say, you know, we're here to help you. You know, don't be afraid to ask. Don't carry the burden on your own. We're here to help you get through this. We want you to succeed. That's a message we try to give.
Well, getting through it is really a big message in this whole program that we've been seeing here at Northwest State Community College. And we hope that some of the information that we've gleaned from folks here, such as you, is helpful to a lot of people and hopeful for a lot of people as we face an opioid addiction crisis around our area.